It was the kind of neighborhood where people left their doors unlocked. The lawns were manicured. The kids played outside until dusk, and families gathered for weekend cookouts. From the outside, everything about the family next door seemed perfect. A loving husband, a devoted wife, and two smiling children who seemed to light up the street. But behind closed doors, something else was brewing, and by the time anyone realized, it was already too late. What followed was one of the most shocking betrayals the community had ever seen. An act so brutal that even seasoned investigators were left shaken. This is the story of the perfect family next door. Our story takes place in a small suburban town in Midwestern America. Not too big, not too small. The kind of place where everyone knew each other by name. At the center of this story was the Miller family. David Miller, 42, a financial advisor with a reputation for honesty and success. He was charismatic, always volunteering for community events, and the kind of man people turned to for advice. Karen Miller, 39, a stay-at-home mother, deeply involved in the PDA and known for her kindness. She loved baking cookies for the neighborhood kids and was always willing to help a neighbor in need. Emily, 12, and Jacob, 9, two children who seemed to have inherited their parents' best traits. They were polite, smart, and active in school sports and church activities. From the outside, they were what everyone wanted to be. Stable, loving, picture perfect. But as we'll learn, appearances can be deceiving. Behind the white-picket fence, the Millers' marriage was far from perfect. David's career wasn't as stable as he pretended. He was drowning in debt from poor investments, desperate to maintain the image of success. At the same time, Karen started confiding in close friends about feeling trapped, like she was living in a marriage built on lies. Arguments grew frequent, though always muffled behind drawn curtains. To outsiders, they were still the ideal couple, but in private, tension was boiling into rage. And when secrets mix with pride and financial desperation, the outcome can turn deadly. It was a quiet Friday in late September. The kids had just returned from soccer practice, and Karen was preparing dinner. Neighbors remember hearing laughter through the open kitchen window, but inside, an argument was erupting. Karen had found documents, proof of David's failed investments, accounts he had hidden from her. Worse, there were whispers of an affair. She confronted him, and for David, whose image meant everything, the walls were closing in. What happened next is pieced together from forensic evidence, police reports, and what little survivors could recall. At some point during that night, David snapped. He grabbed a heavy object, a hammer from the garage, and in a fit of rage, he turned on the people who trusted him most. By the end of the night, the picture-perfect image of the Miller family was shattered in the most horrifying way imaginable. The next morning, a neighbor noticed the Miller's house unusually quiet. The kids hadn't shown up for their Saturday game, and Karen hadn't answered texts. Out of concern, the neighbor walked to the door, only to find it slightly ajar. Inside, they discovered a nightmare. Karen was found first, lying in the living room with blunt force trauma to her head. Upstairs, Emily and Jacob were discovered in their bedrooms, both struck in their sleep. The scene was so gruesome that first responders later admitted it haunted them for years. But David was nowhere to be found. His car was missing, his phone disconnected. The man everyone thought they knew had vanished. Detectives quickly pieced together the evidence. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing of value was stolen. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was personal. The fingerprints on the weapon matched David's. Security cameras from a nearby gas station showed him fueling his car at 2 a.m. alone, looking disheveled. The community was in disbelief. How could the friendly, reliable man who helped organize charity drives murder his own family? A manhunt began. News outlets dubbed him the family man fugitive. Tips poured in from across the state. But David knew how to disappear. He drained the last of his accounts and abandoned his car near a wooded area, sparking a week-long search. Helicopters hovered overhead, dogs combed through thick forest, and neighbors locked their doors at night, fearing he might return. Finally, on the 9th day, David was found, hiding in a cheap roadside motel, using a fake name and attempting to flee to Mexico. When officers stormed the room, David reportedly said just 4 chilling words. They had to know, why would a man murder his own wife and children? Psychologists later testified that David's motive was a cocktail of pride, narcissism, and despair. His carefully constructed image of success had crumbled to him. The exposure of his failures was worse than death. Rather than face humiliation, he decided to erase the people closest to him, the ones who knew the truth. In his twisted logic, it was better that his family die than live with the shame he believed he had brought upon them. But the reality is simple. This wasn't about protection. It was about control. And when he lost it, he chose violence. David Miller stood trial 1 year later. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The weapon, his fingerprints, his financial lies, and his attempted escape. The defense tried to argue mental instability, claiming he suffered a psychological break. But the jury saw through it. After just 6 hours of deliberation, David was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. As the verdict was read, Karen's family wept. Friends of the children brought stuffed animals to the courthouse steps, memorials to lives cut short. The image of the perfect family was gone. All that remained was the haunting truth of what lay beneath. The neighborhood where the Millers once lived is no longer the same. The house was sold, renovated, but for many, it still carries a shadow. Parents in the community speak of locking their doors more often, of no longer assuming perfection when they see it. The children's school held candlelight vigils, their names etched into a memorial plaque by the soccer field they once played on. And every year, on the anniversary of crime, neighbors gather, not to remember David, but to honor Karen, Emily, and Jacob, because in the end, they were the victims of a man who cared more about pride than love. The story of the Miller family forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. How well do we really know the people around us? How often do we mistake appearances for reality? And how many tragedies might be prevented if we look past the surface? If we reached out, if we noticed the cracks before they split wide open. The Millers seemed perfect, but perfection was a mask. And when it slipped, the consequences were deadly. So maybe the real lesson here is this. Behind every perfect picture, there might be a story no one dares to tell. If you found this case as unsettling as we did, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe David's crimes were driven by desperation or pure selfishness? And most importantly, what could have been done to save Karen, Emily, and Jacob? Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more deep dive true crime documentaries like this one, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story.